Hello and welcome to AccessChat. This week we are here with the team from AccessLoop and we're talking about accessible streaming. AccessLoop is a combination of our friends at MyClearText who have been supporting us with captions on AccessChat for years, and Dan Dexter from
MyClearText now.
Yeah, also part of MyClearText, who has also over the years supported us with lots of live events and a production team. So please tell us a little bit more about what AccessLoop is. Obviously, I know, but our audience might not, and why you came to move from being providers of services to creating a software startup.
Yeah, and it's been quite a journey and a huge learning curve for us. Yeah, I think it came out of frustration and annoyance, if I'm truly honest. Lockdown happened. We'd been providing quite a lot of live stream captions with Dan for a number of years. We were always working together, trying to make it as simple as possible and work out the best workflows. And but lockdown hit and platforms sprung up from everywhere. And we had clients asking us, can you put captions on this? Can you put captions on this? And the answer 9 times out of 10 was no. We could put captions on Zoom. Well done to Zoom. We've always been able to integrate. It wasn't great to start with. They've done massive work around it, so it's better. We still provide backup for people who may not be able to keep up with the captions on Zoom. But people were moving away from Zoom 2 or 3 months in with bigger events, wanting to do more. So I was waiting for someone to provide the solution, and I realized they weren't going to, so that we were going to have to provide the solution ourselves. So Dan, we were talking about this throughout lockdown. So we sat down and we were going to do something quite big, a big platform with accessibility. And then we realized what people needed was just the way to do the accessibility. So and that way we could be an add-on to every service rather than be the one service. And that way we felt we'd have wider reach because it was much more about access. And again, we didn't want to make it as part of MyClearText because then people would have to come to MyClearText only for captioning. And we wanted it to be available as a solution around the world. So you could use your own provider, your preferred provider. You could just have captions, you could just have BSL, but you could have that from your own provider. So that was the decision to have it as a standalone company. But yeah, it came out of frustration and desire to solve our own problems, really, and our clients' problems. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the problems around production. So even being able to use platforms like StreamYard, which is browser-based, you have limited ability to adjust the layout. And also it just wasn't accessible. In early conversations I had with StreamYard, they basically said, you know, this isn't something that they were particularly focused on. They were focused on delivering a good production platform. And then we approached platforms and they were saying it was the production side, and basically everybody was passing it on to everybody else and not taking responsibility for it. I love using StreamYard because it's easy. I know I keep saying that word. I'll stop. It's all about AccessLoop today. But what I wanted to be able to do was to say to clients, you can still use this tool and you can still have the captions overlaid. You can still have the sign language. And that's worked really well by, you know, with AccessLoop, it just does make it a lot easier. And it takes that process out of the production side. A lot of my colleagues in the production world, if I'm honest, find accessibility a headache, and a headache that they don't want. They want to pass it on to someone else. So this gives that freedom to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen production companies talk clients out of accessibility because it's such a headache for them, and it's been, let's put it on afterwards. And I remember being in one of those conversations and thinking, right, this has to stop. You know, live should be available to everybody live.
And I agree with what you're saying, because I've also seen it. It's so complicated. It's a reason not to do it.
Yeah.
And I know that, you know, we love MyClearText. I think it's so clever that the way you did it with AccessLoop, it works for all providers. I think that's very smart, very entrepreneurial. So, and it's also in the best interest of our community. And that is what I love about it. So first of all, thank you for that. But I remember when I wanted to obviously make sure that my show, Human Potential at Work, was captioned, and we were trying to work with you at Facebook. Now, this was years ago, but it was ridiculous. Here's somebody that wants to do it right, and you just can't get it right, no matter, and y'all were helping, we were doing it, and then we finally got it working, and then they changed something, and then it didn't work again. So and we want to do it. So what if people are like, really, we got to do that? If we don't make it something that they can be successful at and that makes sense to them, they're not going to do it. So I just wanted to give y'all compliments based on that, because what is right for our community? We all have to come together and think about that. But also, you're an entrepreneur, and so I just love the business decisions that you made. So, Neil, I sort of stepped in. You might have wanted to still make a comment, but kudos.
No, I think it's fine. I absolutely have watched some of the challenges of trying to create accessible live streams, particularly for events. It is challenging, and some of the challenges of integrating with the various different platforms is, yeah, it's not trivial to be able to do this. So as a person delivering accessibility and wanting to communicate about accessibility, there are always choices that we make that are imperfect, because we're always trying to balance reach versus ease of use versus accessibility, because no one has it perfectly nailed. So I think that the strategy to be the middle, to be able to, you know, be interoperable with multiple platforms and inject accessibility into a stream is a really good idea. I also think that one of the things that I really liked about the platform was being able to maintain the fullness of the sort of presentation stream window and have the captions nice and large separately, but it's not disrupting all of the media, and also having the signer quite large, but not over where the action happens, because I think that, you know, yes, signers are there for a purpose, but for the people that don't need them, when you overlay it over the top of other information, that detracts from their experience. And so what you've done is you've created an experience that is inclusive, and I really like that.
I mean, I think that was the beauty about bringing what we've tried to do. So MyClearText, as part of the development, represented the accessibility side. We knew what size the caption should be. We talked a lot about the real estate, who gets the real estate of the screen. And then Dan was able to bring in that whole production. I remember him in the development meeting saying we need to be able to scale it. We need to be able to remove it out, separate it out, so that people don't have to play around with the lower thirds, which is what our names are. And yeah, so it was great. And I think we've really brought the two together. So we've brought the production side of live events and accessibility together, and we've made it simple for everybody. We've just made it easy to bring them together, whereas that's the trouble we were having, is bringing the two together was really hard and had lots of issues. The other thing I noticed was production companies can get very interested in the real estate, so you get tiny captions and you get green screens behind interpreters, and every time they move their hand out anywhere, it goes and they look armless. And so we wanted to put a stop to that and really make it standardized boxes, standardized text, so that we would protect the accessibility, really. Yeah. And we haven't had massive pushback from that, because once you see the final feed, it actually looks great.
Yeah, and one thing we also want to do was not just make it visually good for the audience, but also make it easier for the providers. So, you know, captioners joining, they can manage their own changeovers really easily. You know, they're not guessing when the other person has stopped, they have an alert which says they're now the live captioner. And the same with the sign language interpreters. They request control, and then when the live interpreter finishes, they can just hand over control, and it's a seamless transition. Unlike when I'm trying to get it and I'm pressing a button, I'm sort of hoping for the best that I haven't cut them off mid-sentence. It gives that control back to the providers as well.
We did an event this morning which had an international sign language. She said, wow, this is the first time in the whole of lockdown where I've had control of my handover and my work. And that was lovely to hear, because that's what we were trying to do. We were trying to solve everybody's problems. Now, don't get me wrong, we could solve them better, but it was the start. This is the start. We've got lots of plans for AccessLoop, lots of other accessibility issues within live streaming that need to be looked at. So, this is the beginning, and this is the first platform really that's just all about accessibility.
Absolutely. Deborah, you had another question.
Yes, you were just speaking about international caption, and so I want to bring that up because I know that's something that we've really struggled with in the United States. We are appropriately all about ASL, American Sign Language, but the problem is, and I keep saying this to the U.S. corporation, the U.S. global corporations, you need to be thinking about this from the international lens. And we actually got into this situation where we had reached out to an American captioning company, and it was an event for the UN, and the UN has certain contracts and rights, and it must be international. And it just got so complicated. And what we found was there weren't enough providers, there weren't enough international captioners themselves. It was just a really complicated process, and I know it caused a lot of confusion. And so I keep saying to the American companies, if you're doing a global event, please don't do it just with, thank you for doing ASL, thank you, but keep in mind you have a global audience. You should really be doing this as an international sign language, but it's so complicated. Am I missing something?
I think there's a shortage in kind of accessibility professionals now. I think it was interesting at the beginning of lockdown, automatic captions were being feted as the saving of the world, let's be honest, and they haven't really done what they said they did on the tin. And we've had countless people come to us saying, I used it on my event, I'm not using it again, we need human captioners. So the demand has surged for good quality human communication professionals, and the demand for kind of sign language and international sign language has really surged as well. What I'm finding, I don't claim to be a huge expert, but I work with experts in this field, so I seek knowledge on this because I'm an expert in captioning, but I'm learning all the time about sign language. It's a very unique and niche space, but I am finding more requests for international sign language, and I'm finding providers, and that's something that we're working really hard to do so that we can provide that. I've seen it advised that if you would have a number of different sign languages available. So there's an accessibility organisation in Ireland that recommends that you would have British Sign Language, International Sign Language, depending on your audience. Now, I don't know anybody with that budget. So I think trying to reach the widest audience possible is the way to go. And International Sign Language can be that. And captions, obviously.
Orla, I would have a question to your community. What are y'all doing to get more international sign language interpreters? Are y'all doing something as that part of the community to address it? And I know Antonio has a question.
Yeah, I can't answer that, to be fair, but all I can say is, as a company, we're trying to source more and more people. That's what we're trying to do. There's always lots of training going on in the sign language community. So yeah, we're just looking for more people. That's all we can do right now. But yeah, I can find out for you.
Okay, so with that shortage in terms of professionals, they also need to maximize their time.
Yeah.
So some of them might be really busy. and we know that if you were in the before 2 years ago, they would have to travel, they will be able to do a job and then go back home. How can we maximize their time, and at the same time, how can we complement sign language with captions? Because sign language it's very particular in terms of the audience, but we also have a lot of people out there who get an impairment later in life, who don't understand sign language, or some who just want to experience a video without sound. How can we complement? How can we bridge things here?
I think one of the key things, I think that's really important, and I think kind of talking about the demand as well, there just isn't the supply of captioners and interpreters to be going out on site all the time. So one thing we really need to be looking at is how do we do that in a hybrid environment? How do we bring in interpreters remotely? How do we bring in captioners remotely? And how do we utilize that so that we can essentially maximize on their time and their output? And I think that's, from a production side of things, I think that's the key, is not just being able to bring them in. You have a corner in a conference normally where you have all the accessibility, you have the interpreters, and you have a screen with the captions on. Like in the virtual world, we need to make that accessible everywhere, and so it's not just the corner, it's on the big screen. But that also means potentially bringing in the remote interpreters, so they can be working from home, and we can still maximize on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was at an event that they insisted I went on site for. So we had 2 captioners, we had 2 BSL interpreters standing around for 4 hours waiting to do 90 minutes. And for me, it really was something to really think about and think, yeah, we can't keep doing this. So as a company, we are actually committing to staying remote, because the captioners prefer it. We have all of the expertise to deliver anything online. We've been doing it for the last 15 months. So we've had 3 requests so far this week to go on site, and we were able to deliver solutions that were completely satisfactory remotely. So we haven't. But I would challenge production companies not to forget the last 15 months where we were able to deliver everything remotely and successfully, and not to just go back into old ways of having people hanging around on site. So yeah, great question.
I think another important topic is how can we make this scalable and at the same time affordable, because there's plenty of organizations who have the goodwill of making events accessible, but then they realize, oh well, there's not much we can do because we can't afford. And sometimes this is a real issue. People, because the cost of productions online went really down and everyone can do them. But the fact that everyone can do them at the level of going online and doing video, it does mean that they can then do the next step and make them accessible.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be creative. I think it's important to have a budget. People say to me, what's the most important thing I can do with accessibility? I say, have a budget. Look for sponsorship, look for a company that will sponsor your captions, and you will then advertise the fact that they've sponsored your accessibility. Look for partners, look for a captioning company that you could maybe promote and they could give you a reduced rate. We do that with a number of organizations because we want to help them to be accessible, and they give us a shout out. So, it works for everybody. I think you don't have to caption everything. There's times when you could use automatic captions when there's one speaker presenting. It works best in that way, but provide the support around it. There's lots of things you can do that don't require having to always pay for it.
Yeah, and I think just going back to that point, so much of online video is consumed with captions. So why not have the captions on at the point of entry rather than adding them on afterwards? Because if you think outside of just accessibility, it's a much bigger, there's much bigger reach with having caption videos. It's not just about accessibility, it's about people flicking through and being, oh yeah, that's got captions, I'll follow that, I'll see what that's saying, and if I'm interested, I might turn the sound on. You know, it's all those kind of questions. So it goes beyond accessibility. It goes just about general access, I suppose, of just everybody being able to watch it. So I think the question is more of a marketing budget. You know, it's do you want it available to everybody, or do you just want it available to the people who can be bothered to turn the sound on?
Yeah,
right.
Sorry, I just make a quick point. I always say, you know, if you were trying to reach a new audience as a company, you would put money into researching that community. You'd put money into maybe changing how your product looks to make it more acceptable to that new audience, that new customer base. You know, it's the same. We want diversity and inclusion. Well, if you want a diverse and inclusive event, you're going to have to probably put some of that money you would have put into your marketing and your product into providing accessibility. There's an awful lot of lip service paid by some quite big companies, I would say. You just have to invest if you want that diverse and inclusive audience.
And I will say this, and I am saying this a lot, and this is what we're going to talk about this a lot at my new nonprofit Billion Strong, but accessibility is not a nice to have. It is not something that you have to remember to add on to your marketing budget. If you are having a conference and you're not considering our security and our privacy, then we're not coming to your conferences. If you have a conference and it is not accessible to all of us, then we're going to start coming to your conferences. We already see some of this happening. We see things like men saying, well, I'm not going to be on that panel because there are no women on the panel, or I'm not going to be on the panel because everybody on the panel is white and I want to see some diversity. The organizations, because it's not just corporations, anyone doing conferences, if you're not making captioning and accessibility a priority, we're not going to go to you, and we're going to start shouting out, and it's already happening. People are being called out when they do things that aren't captioned. And so the one thing is not being said, I know you're trying to be nice, Orla and Dan, but I'm saying to if you're not doing captioning, you're going to have a problem with the community, because we're tired of not being included. We're tired of the crappy captions that don't make any sense. We're tired of the half-ass ways of people doing it. The community is tired of being left out in captioning, and this is not just for people with disabilities. We all benefit from it. So I know you're being real nice saying make it part of your budget, but I'm saying the community is tired of this. We are tired of this.
But on that, there's also something that sometimes, particularly people are doing live events or recordings, or you are leaving a legacy. So if you are doing something today, it's going to stay there on the web. So it's going to be available tomorrow. It might be available in 3 months, but someone might go and watch it in 2 or 3 years, or even in 10 years. And you are building a legacy, and that thing is also something important. It's it's important that archive is accessible.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I remember, now this was before COVID, and so I have no idea what this is now, but I remember Facebook and Verizon, at least 2 of them, and I think more did it as well, did some studies, and they found that 80 to 85% of videos were watched with the sound turned off. So if you are doing a video and you're not captioning it, 80 to 85% of your market is not watching it. Is that okay? I mean, somehow we have got to change this dialogue. This is not a nice to have. Sorry, I'm just saying.
I totally agree.
I totally agree.
We're with you.
It's so annoying, and you see our former president not even making it a priority. We're having conversations that are about saving people's lives, and we're not going to have captioners.
But we had the issue here. There was a huge campaign, hashtag where's the interpreter. You know, we had Boris Johnson delivering public information and no interpreter. Yeah. And, you know, the answer was, well, at this time you'll have an interpreter. That's not equality of service for people who use sign language as a first language. And, you know, that was dreadful. And, you know, all hats off to Nicola Sturgeon, who always had a sign language interpreter next to her. So
and we're going to notice it. And I think what these organizations need to understand, every time you don't provide sign language, every time you don't provide captioner, the community is going to speak out against you. And that's not, I remember one time Neil said something that I thought was really unfair and very mean when he said, well, the people out on social media that are being the ugliest about some of the stuff are Americans. And I'm like, no, that's not true. And then I went and looked. Okay, maybe you did at that time. Yeah.
One of the interesting things that happened in Portugal with these press conferences and COVID information, it made a shift in terms of accessibility. So it's quite interesting that the UK government is quite good on web accessibility and is really at the core of the services. The Portuguese government is completely out of that. On their websites, they are not accessible. But in terms of the COVID communication, they weren't fully accessible. So, and even today, all the press conferences and everything that is the topic, they have sign language professionals following the politicians almost at every government event. So, and that was a real shift.
Yeah. So there is a societal shift, and if corporations and organizations aren't realizing this, the community is going to make sure that they understand it. And we've got the CRIP community, the deaf, it's amazing that these young people are not going to put up with it anymore. So if you care about your brand, you might want to make accessibility a priority, because we are no longer not going to be included. So, and that's been, you've seen that happen. I mean,
I heard a really interesting saying today, and it said 1 in 4 of your customers may have a disability, but 3 in 4 of your customers love someone with a disability. So, you really need to start thinking about that for your consumers. So, and I would say that I would, anything without captions, I just swipe right. As a protest.
100%.
Right. I might not need them, but if you don't have them, I'm not going to go. I'm not speaking for your event. I'm not sharing your event. Yeah. So
no, I don't watch it, and I point it out.
No, I have people on my social network feeds that I collaborate with or that I work for in terms of projects. And I see that some of the activities that I've been doing over the last couple of years with Neil and Deborah, it's a plus in terms of communication. This brings up a level of empathy that they know that you have in relation to the topic that opens the doors.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And it's us being accomplices for the community. That's what we are. We are being accomplices and allies for the community. That's why, and we do appreciate the work you are doing, but at the same time, I love that you did AccessLoop in a way that, once again, the community benefits. And I don't like any more entrepreneurs that do stuff where only they're going to benefit. I've been an entrepreneur for years, and I have put so much of my own personal blood, sweat, tears, money into this work because I wanted to make a difference. But I think more and more people are going to want to follow organizations that are trying to make a difference, like MyClearText and AccessLoop, not only for just MyClearText, but you're trying to make a difference for the community and for the other providers. And
we needed to bring the production world into accessibility, and we had to do the work to get them over the mark, because they don't have the expertise. They're being asked now. A lot of accessibility officers seem to go out of the way or lost their jobs or went on furlough. So it was down to production companies were having to make decisions, and we would have them rock up going, I have no idea what we're doing here. What do we do? And as a provider, you should have all of the expertise technically, accessibility wise, to be able to give that advice. And at MyClearText, that's what we really, really can provide, technical solutions to bring these worlds together. And AccessLoop does it for you. You don't even need MyClearText, it just does it for you.
So, I mean, I think that you made a really interesting side comment there. And that was, most of the accessibility officers got furloughed. Yeah. What does that tell you about the priorities of some of these organizations, when, in a time when people are more vulnerable, more likely to need support than ever before, that they're deciding that they can make a saving by not employing someone to deal with accessibility? So I think that in itself is a concern, because actually, they're really missing a trick there. If anything, they should have really engaged with those people, and then they would have probably increased their productivity.
Yeah.
And the second point is definitely that we do want to empower organizations to do this and producers to be able to do this independently. And then finally, just before we close, because we're on our half hour, is to say, what will it take to get the other streaming platform to open up to allow inclusive media to, what is it that you need and what do they need to do to enable platforms like AccessLoop, not necessarily just AccessLoop, to be able to add that additional layer of accessibility to conferences and streams as we go forwards, and so both for hybrid workplace, where we've got people that are both at home and at work, and also for hybrid conferences, because this last year has been all about streaming. It's going to be a mixture in the future.
Yeah. Dan, do you want to take that?
No, you go.
No.
Sorry, I was.
Well, I think the problem to ask platforms to do this is you're asking them to understand production. You're also asking them to understand accessibility. Now, I've been in the accessibility field for 30 years, and I learn stuff every day. Dan's been doing it 15 years because he's a spring chicken. But there's it's a big ask what you're asking, Neil. And actually, that's where I think AccessLoop is the thing that sits in the middle, because we have all that expertise. So we would like every platform to be able to work with us so that people can just put this in the middle, and then they don't have to spend money. They don't have to become experts or put stuff in without asking people. That the expertise is within one platform. There are some platforms we can't stream to, so Teams is really difficult to get into, and we have a lot of people asking to use AccessLoop with Teams for the sign language and for the captions. There's a couple of other platforms. LinkedIn is problematic as well, but things like everything else is pretty much open to us getting that in. But as with hybrid events, we have a facility within AccessLoop where you can take the captions and put them in the room, and because it adds tiny delays, so the captions are real time. And we're working on a solution to take the sign language feed out and be able to put that in the room as well.
Yeah, I mean, Orla made a really strong point in that, it's partly about the expertise, and the platforms, they don't have the expertise, and also in many ways it gets in the way of what they're trying to deliver. Just to build a platform is such a big task, and then require the accessibility. So what I want to see us sort of develop further in the longer term is better integration with these platforms, so we can kind of be that sort of, I suppose, the glue that brings in the accessibility. Not because we want to be we want to be the best accessibility tool on the market, but we want it to be the widest use for accessibility, so that people can access what they need to access.
And shout out to StreamYard. They've brought us onto their show. We've done 2 shows with them. They had a lot of users wanting accessibility. AccessLoop works brilliantly. The show today is running on StreamYard through AccessLoop, and that's what everybody's going to be watching. And they were fantastic. If people ask about accessibility, they send people to AccessLoop, and Hopin is now doing the same. If you're running anything on Hopin, they will send you to AccessLoop if you want captions. So we've provided a solution for those platforms now. They have an answer when people ask them about accessibility. Yes, we integrate with AccessLoop. So that's where I feel we're really going to make a difference, and it will be great for other platforms to get involved with that too.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Looking forward to the chat on Tuesday.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, brilliant.
It's always great to see you guys.
Yes.
And thank you to MyClearText, to Barclays, and to Microlink for supporting us over the years. And I'm sure you all agree with me here.
Of course.
We really are grateful. We were very grateful for MyClearText. And now AccessLoop. Woohoo!
Woo! Double thanks. Great.